All right, welcome back to part 2 of lesson 10, where we are looking at lesson 10 here, and we've finished 1 through 7 in part 1. And just to kind of pick up where we left off in lesson 7, we were learning how to pick a random button, and we had a variable here called color, and we set that variable to these RGB parameters here. We have 4 set property buttons for button 1, 2, and 3 and 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4 over here, and we've set the color of that to the variable color, which is actually an orange color. The default right now is this teal color. We've made another variable called Diff Color. We've set it to these RGB values here, and we made another variable called rand button ID, which selects one of these buttons at random, and then we changed one random button to the diff color variable. So now we go into number 8, and what number 8 is going to do is help us make a random color. So again, we have Alexis and Michael here going through this dialogue explaining how they would do this, and you could read through that and it might help you with 9, 10, and 11 here, but actually 9, 10, yeah, those are all random color things. But I'm going to go ahead and jump into 9, which is the first one where we're looking at what or how to pick this random color. So it says, first make the base color be a string with random values in it rather than hard-coded. And what that means is right here we have this variable called color, and it's hard-coded because we're telling it every time we want it to be 230, 0. So what it's saying is, instead, why don't we make that into random values instead of being hard-coded? And then it's second, add 20 to each of the RGB values to make the different color. And then so it says we have to insert several lines of code in 2 different places in the program, just before the variable color that we created and just before the variable diff color. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mess with this variable color here. So in order to, what I want to do is I want to make these numbers here random. So this number, and this number, I want to make those random. So the easiest way to do that would be to make some new variables. So I'm going to set some new variables here, and I'm going to use this declare a variable. I'm going to need 3 of those. So I'm going to take 1, 2, and 3, because those are going to be my RGB values. So in the first case, I'm going to change the X to an R, and then I'm going to change the next one to a G, and then the next one to B, and those are going to be my RGB values. And what I want is random numbers there. So if I come up here and go back to my math functions and I pick a random number, I'm going to need 3 of those. So I'm going to go ahead and drag them up right now because they're all going to be the same pretty much, but they're all going to pick a different random number. So right now, when you put these up here by default, like we said before, it gives you between 1 and 10. But what we want to do is we want to pick a random number that covers the entire spectrum of RGB colors. And what that means is you can set these RGB values to anywhere between 0 and 255. So for my first number, instead of 1s, I'm going to put 0s in there, because that's the lowest number that I can use for an RGB value. Now the highest number I can use is 255, but we don't want to put 255 there because this next one said that I want to change that diff color to add, I think what it said was 10. No, sorry, it says add 20. So add 20 to each of the RGB values. So I don't want to put 255 here, because then if let's say as an example, R came out to be 255 here, and then I come down later and it adds 20 to that, it's going to be outside the RGB range. So instead, what I want to do is take 255 and subtract 20 from that. So that gives me 235. Oops, that's not, there we go, 235. I'm going to do the same thing for all of these, because it's going to give me a random number between 0 and 235 for each of these. And then what I want it to do is I want it to take this RGB here, and instead of using the hard coding that I've done here, I'm going to change this to R, G, and B. So R, G, and B. So what should happen now is when I hit run, I'm going to get three variables in RGB, a random number between 0 and 235. Then my variable color is going to get those variables put in here into these parameters for my RGB, or these RGB values. Then it's going to set the color, the background colors to color, which is going to be this. So I'm going to try it right now just to see what happens. So I click on run. Look at that. So what I got was, I got a different color here. These three turned a different color. This one didn't, because remember in the last one, this one is the one that's diff color, and it's fixed at 250, 175, 20. So that's my next step in this one, is I want to get that one set up to be a random that's going to be similar to these two. So let me try it one more time just to make sure that that's working. I clicked run, and see I get another set of random colors, and then this thing moves, but I still have the same orange. So that's working as planned. So I have three more variables, R, G, and B, and each of those get a random number between 0 and 235. Now the next thing I want to do, it says here, is I want to add 20 to each of the RGB values to make diff color. So right now I have diff color is this hard-coded thing right here. So what I want to do next is I want to come down here, and I want to make some new RGB values for diff color. So I'm going to go to my variables, and I've already got RGB as values here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change them. So after I've already set them here, I'm going to change the one that is diff color. So I'm going to take not the one where I'm declaring the variable, but where I'm assigning it here. So the assign a variable, or using the assignment operator. And I'm going to take three of those. I'm going to put one there. I'm just going to put them all in a row. And these are going to be the same RGs and Bs. So I'm just going to take that, the same R, because I'm going to change its value by 20. G and B, I'm going to change their values by 20. And in order to do that, what I need to do is go back to my math functions and get my plus boxes. I'm going to put three of them in there. Now remember, this is an assignment operator, so it's not working the same way that it would work if you were in math class. So what I'm doing is I'm making R equal to R plus 20. So if I want to put R and then 20 in there, so what that means is I'm just adding 20 to R. And now I'm doing the same thing to G. I'm making G plus 20, and then I'm making B plus 20. So I put in B, and then here I put in 20. So I've made them RGB, and now instead of this one here, the diff color variable, instead of that being hard coded to that orange color, I'm now going to change this to RGB. So theoretically, what has happened, or not theoretically, but hopefully what has happened, is I've made three variables called RGB that are set to a random number between 0 and 235. I've made a variable called color, and I've set that to an RGB value with those three random numbers. I've set the property of all four buttons to that color. Then I've taken those RGB values and I've increased each of them by 20, and then I've made a new variable called diff color, and then I've assigned those variables to diff color, and then I have this one that I had before, the rand button ID, and I've made that diff color. So what should happen if I do this is now I should get four colors that kind of look the same, but the random button one should be slightly different. It should be plus 20 on all the different values. So let me hit reset. It takes me back to my original color, and hit run. And it looks like it works, because right now this is telling me that I have random button that's 4, and that's that one here. And if you can see, this looks a little bit lighter than these three. So these three. So by increasing that number by 20, I've made the color lighter. So I'm going to try it again, hit run again, and now I have this green, and yep, that's my random button. And that's let me do that again and run again. Yep, that's my random color right there. So now, so it looks like I'm doing pretty good right now. I've got it generating random colors. I've got it setting the properties of these buttons. I've changed one of those colors here, and then I've assigned it to one of the random button. So that's working pretty good so far. So now I think I've done everything that it says. Let me double check just to make sure. So it said I did that. I added 20 to each. I have this different color. I ran multiple times to test it, and it looks like it's working. Now, if you wanted to, you could click on this piece here, and it tells you, what Alexis and Michael said in their discussion. If you needed that example, but I don't need it. I think I did everything that I'm supposed to do there. Okay, so that works. So now let me go to the next one is 10. So I click Finish, Continue. And now I'm at part 10 of lesson 10. So now the next step, it says to encapsulate the game board using a function. So I don't think I talked about functions in earlier on. I can't remember because I've done another video. This is my third video of the day on this. But what a function is and what they mean by encapsulate is I'm taking pieces of my program and putting them into capsules. So when I go to run my main program, so say I have my main program down here and I've got these little capsules of programs up here. My main program can call a function, so it'll say call this particular function. It goes up here and it pulls that function or capsule, and then it runs it down here. And what that allows us to do is, instead of typing this capsule over and over and over again every time we need it, it goes and it pulls it, and then it just keeps pulling it anytime it needs it. And we could have multiple functions like that and make our program a little bit more efficient if we do that. So what it wants us to do here, it says we're going to encapsulate the game board and make these four pieces here the game board. So when playing the game, we need to create a new game board repeatedly, not just when the program starts, because what's happened so far is every time I hit run, it creates a new game board, but it only does that one time. So we need it to keep doing that. So it says, since we have a chunk of code that we want to use repeatedly, that's a clue that we should take that code and put it in a function. So it says in our do this section here, define a new function called setBoard. So if I go over here in this a little green section here, or whatever color that is, and it says get a new function. So the one we want to use is this first one, just defining a function, and I'm going to take it and just put it, it probably doesn't matter where I put it at this point. Later on I may have to move it around, but I want to put everything that I've done related to these things here in that. I'm going to call it setBoard. So it says define a new function, call it setBoard. So setBoard using my camel case with the capital B. Oops, there we go. And then it says add a call to setBoard. So the call, that's the part that is going to call the function, because if we just do a function and we put all this stuff in there and we hit run, it's not going to do anything. It's only going to do this when we call it to do that function. So it says move all the sets. So move all the code that sets the colors inside this function. So it says this is actually all the code that we have so far. So let's go ahead and do that first. So I want to go ahead and take all of these. Everything I've done so far, I'm basically putting in this function. And I've got all these. And you notice as I'm putting these in here, I'm getting these yellow things pop up saying that it's not recognizing the variable. Well, that's happening because I'm encapsulating this off, so it can't see it anymore. If I wanted to have a variable that was visible to the entire program, that's called a global variable. It would have to be outside of the function box. But in this case, we're putting everything inside the function because we want all of this game board thing in one function. So there I have one function. It's called setBoard. I'm getting an error here because it says I've defined setBoard, but it's not called for. So that's why we have to put this call function in here. So right there it says call a function, and you notice we have two of them here. We have one that's just call a function, and the other one that's call a function with parameters. We don't have parameters in this, so we just want the call a function right here, and the one we're going to call is the one we made called setBoard. And then lo and behold, my error goes away, and what will happen is every time I click run, this thing right here, this setBoard is going to call, and then it's going to run through all this. Which right now it's not going to look any different, when we run it here. But later on, once we get clicking, then it will work. Okay, so we've done that. If you want to, you can look at the text version of your code and just make sure that that looks like what it's supposed to look like. So right now, actually my set board, I put it below. So I guess if I want to stay consistent with what they have, I can do the same thing. I can just take this one and drag it up here. So I have, ooh, maybe I can, there we go. Drag it up to the top. So I have my calls up here and I put my functions on the bottom. I guess that's probably the way I'm going to do it. But the main thing is to be consistent, because it will technically work either way. So it says this is easy in text mode, and then it tells me, you know, how to put it in text mode. We already know all that. So I think I've done everything that I'm supposed to do. So it says, like I already told you, it says this should not behave any differently because we just organized it in a different way. So if I click run, I'm still going to get that, but nothing's going to happen when I click the buttons yet because I haven't put any event handler in there to do that. Okay, so then next I click finish, and I'm trying to keep track of my time here. I don't want to go too long on these. And then I'm going to continue, and now I've got the next one, which is 11. And 11 is more about functions in the Color Sleuth app. What this says is next display which button was chosen in the console. So I'm going to use my debug console, and I'm going to use that that console log so I can see which button is being clicked on. So in the game, the correct button is the one that we randomly chose to make a different color. Let's add a console log message to display its ID. It will make future work easier. So remember I said before that the console log, we want to put these in there because it'll make it easier for us as we go along, because it's going to get complicated. So add a console log statement like this at the end of the setBoard function. So what it is here is it looks like it wants us to put it inside the function setBoard. I've already got one in there that says that's the random button that I used earlier. Let's go ahead. I'm going to keep that one in there, and I'm going to drag up a new console log button, and this one is going to have another plus sign in it, just like the last one. So I drag a plus sign in there. I'm going to put my first string, which I'm going to say the correct one is a space and then quotes, and then the random button ID, which actually that's the same thing I already had pretty much. Yeah, but I did that earlier. But it's pretty much the same thing I just did. So actually, I'm going to get rid of that one. I don't need that. So the correct one is. And then I think that's all it wants me to do in step 11. So that's pretty easy. So let's double check, make sure that that's what we did. So add a console log statement at the end of the setBoard function. Overall, the setBoard function will look like this. So we've got function, and if we go to the text version, if you can read that in the video, I'm not sure, but it's got function, setBoard, which is right here, and then all the different colors all the different things we're doing: generating random colors, make all 4 buttons have the same color, pick a random button ID and set its color to something different, and then the console log says the correct one is the random button ID. So that's what we've done. So I'm going to go ahead and jump to the next one, which is activating the buttons. So run, and that works. Okay, go ahead and finish, continue. And now I'm at 12, which is going to be some more text. That's going to be some more dialogue between Alexis and Michael. And what they're going to do is they're talking about how the setBoard function should look like. So again, you don't have to read through this if you don't want to, but this is a good idea right here. What they're doing is they're writing out basically in pseudocode how this program should work. So they're talking about the function. They're saying, you know, how it works, you know, how these on event buttons, what they're supposed to do. They're making changes to it as they go. They're trying to fix the errors, and then that gets them to the final program. That's a good idea to do if you want to take a look at that. It's probably neat to look at. And now we're moving on to 13. So we'll do 13, 14, and 15, and then we'll stop and make another, or split this into a third part. So step 1. says I need to make a random button ID a global variable. So I think I talked about that a minute ago. I was talking about global variables, and it says making this random button ID global means that modifying the code outside of the function, or so I can use it outside of the function in anything else. So it says create a new variable on line 1, which is the very first one, and that's the variable, and I'm going to declare it right here. And it's going to be called rand button ID, which I think is the same one. So I'm probably going to have to delete that one later. But let's see. Let's go ahead and do this, what it says. Oh, no, this is the one to reset. I think this is the reset one. So variable, so rand button ID. Random button ID. And then what we want to do, or no, okay, I know what I'm doing here. You don't need the equal sign because we're not going to set its value yet. We're just going to declare it. So what I did is I dropped that one with the equal sign and just got the one that just says var. So now I've created the variable, and we've done that. So it looks like that. So go to text. It says, and inside the setBoard function. Yeah, so we can actually, this is probably the easiest way to do that. So down here where I had random button ID, we want to get rid of that VAR. So now what it does is when I go back to show blocks, now this variable, I can use it outside of this function. And down here, I haven't declared it anymore. I'm actually just assigning a value to it. So let me go back to the text again so you can see what I did. I added this up here. Variable rand button ID, which we already had before. The only difference with this one down here on my line 16, yours may be different, but only thing I've done is I've gotten rid of the VAR, so I'm no longer declaring it, and now I'm assigning it. So I created it outside of here so it can be used in more than one place besides just the setBoard function. So then it says the updated code should look like that, which it does. Test it out, and again it says it's not going to really do anything. It's going to do the same thing, so we don't really have to test it because if it worked last time, it probably works now. And I've got no errors, so I want to go ahead. Oops, I clicked run. I don't have to, but I got it worked. So I click finish, and then I click continue, and now I'm going on to 14, I think. And I'm at 22 minutes, so we should be able to get through these in under half an hour. So we're adding the checked correct button and event handlers, it says. So this feels like a big step, it says, but it's actually just a few small ones. So it's going to do something different now. So the first thing we want to do is add a new function definition for check correct button ID. That contains a console log statement to display the parameter, and then it calls setBoard. So add 4 click event handlers, 1 for each button that call check correct, and then test it. So the very first thing that we want to do is it says we want to make this function called check correct. And then what we're going to do is we can go over here to our functions, and I'm going to put this just right below setBoard, I guess, for now. I'm going to use this first one, define a function. I'm going to drag that up there, and I want to call it check correct. Check correct. And if you notice in this one, it's asking me to put in their button ID. So that variable button ID that I have somewhere, or maybe that I'm going to get later, is it wants me to put that in there. So right now I drug the function up that doesn't let me do that. I drug this one up, but I guess I'm going to need to pass a variable or a parameter into it. So I want to click on that little arrow to expand it, and then I'm typing in there button ID with a capital I, and then what I'm supposed to put in there is a console log statement. So I go into console log, and then it says I should type in a plus sign or put in a plus sign. So I'll drag a plus sign in, and I'm going to see that it says checking, and then button ID. And right now it doesn't like that. It doesn't like that variable button ID. I'll have to see. I'll have to figure out why. And then I want to put in the call the function set board. So I have this. That's the one I have right here. And I wonder if it wants me to put the same one in. So add a function definition for that. Let's see here. Check button ID. Yeah, so I need to put a new one in there. So I'm going to go over here to call a function. I'm going to drag that in there, and then I'm going to put in set board. And that same function that I already used. Set board there. And then it says add 4 click event handlers, 1 for each button, that call check correct. So what I want to do is this still doesn't like button ID. Oh, because I haven't used it yet. Okay, so now I want to be using it in a second. So I need 4 event handlers. Those are under UI controls. These are the on event blocks that we've used in the past. So I need 4 of those. So I'm going to take 4. I'm going to put it, I guess, here under set board, the first one. So I want 4 of those because I want to need 1 for each button. And let's see here. So 1 for each button. So this first one is going to be button 1. Second one's going to be button 2. Then button 3. And then button 4. And then the next thing I want to do is it's just going to call check correct. So my function, I'm going to grab this one down here that calls a function, and I'm going to type in check correct. And then you can see my little error went away because I'm using it now. I'm going to do the same thing for all of them. But actually I need to pass a parameter in here. I need to give it, because remember when we set up check correct here, it's asking for something called button ID, so I need to give it that. So that's what I need to do right here is, and what I want to do is I want to put in there button 1, because I've pressed button 1, and like you can see it gives you the example here, check correct in button 1. So button 1, and then I want to do another function. I'm just going to go ahead and drag the one that has the parameters in there, and I'm going to type in check correct again. And this one's button 2, so I'm going to type in button 2. And this one is button 3, so I'm going to type in button, or this is check correct again. And then this one is button 3. And then I need one more check correct for button 4. Check correct. And this should be button 4. Alright, so what I've got here, 4 event handlers, just like it says up here. I've put the check correct function in there, and the parameter that I've passed is the name of the button. So in this case here, if I click on button 1, it's checking correct. It's checking to see if button 1 is correct. So test it. It says once you've added this code, we should see some changes. When we click on the buttons, we should see a console log message that says it was clicked. We should see the board change every time we click on a button, and then the console message is showing the correct answer for each new board. So let's pay attention to the debug console as we do this. I'll make it a little bit bigger. Go ahead and hit run. So now I've got the new thing, the new game board. I've got one that looks different. This one is already telling me that the correct one is button 2, and I can see that. It looks a little different. So I'm going to click on it, and then you can see it said checking button 2. It checked button 2, and then it changed. So now the correct button is 4, so I'm going to click on it. My colors, even though they're all shades of green, for some reason they're still random, it appears. So it appears to be working. There we go. These 3 look the same. This one looks different. These 3 look the same. This one looks different. So it's working down here. Every time I click a button, it's changing all of them. And it's also telling me which one is the correct button that I should be clicking. It's also telling me which one that I just clicked, and it's checking it. So that's doing what it's supposed to do. So I think I've done everything I need to do there. Let me make this debug console a little smaller and just kind of go over this again. So you can make sure if you're having a problem, you can look at this and see where you went wrong. So I have this variable called random button ID. I have this function called setBoard. I've got 4 event handlers. Each of those is assigned to a different button 1, 2, 3, and 4. Each of them runs the check correct function using whatever button it is that I click. So then I go down here, the check correct function. The only thing it's doing right now is it's printing something in the console log, and it's resetting the board. So right now that's the only thing that this function is doing. Later on we're going to add some more things that it does. And then I've got my function here that I did before. This is what changes the colors. So that's all we have right now. Not a lot. That seemed pretty tricky, but really we didn't do that much to it. But now you can see it looks like it is at least working like we think we want it to work. So that's the easy part. It's going to get a little bit harder here in a minute, but I'm going to go ahead and click Finish, Continue. I'm going to do one more of these, and even though I think I'm over my time a little bit by a minute or so, that's okay. I'll do the next one, 15, just so we can end on an easy one. So it says adding an if statement in the check correct function. So this is what I was talking about a second ago. We need to add some more stuff in that check correct. So it says add a simple if else statement inside the function check correct that compares the button ID and the random ID and displays a message to console log that they got right or wrong. So it says insert something like this. So let me go I'm going to find that function check correct, which is down here, and it says to insert an if statement. So those are in the control, and it says I want to use an if else. So I'm going to grab the middle one, which is if else. I'm going to go ahead and put this. I'll put it right up here at the top, I guess. Let's see. Let me make sure I'm doing that right in the right spot. Check correct. Yeah, last time I put it here. I guess it doesn't matter. Either way, it's probably fine. So then we have our if statement. Now we want to get this this double equals and the equality operator. So that's going to go in this first little box here. So I'm going to go grab one of those from the math blocks, the equality operator, and I want to check to see if button ID is the same as random button ID, which means the button I clicked, is button I clicked the same as the button that has the different color? Because that's what random button ID, that's the one that has a different color. Button ID is the one that I click. So I'm just going to type those in there. Button ID, oops, that's not typing in there. There we go. Button ID with the capital I. Is it the same as rand button ID using the camel case with capital B, capital I, random button ID? And then I want to console log. That's in the variables block. So when I come up here and try to drag that over there, there we go. Console log. And if that does equal that, which means I've selected the right button, then I'm going to say you got it right. So you got it right in my console log. And then if it doesn't equal, then it must mean I got it wrong. So I'm going to put a console log statement in there that says wrong. So wrong. Okay, so then I'm going to test it to make sure that it works. I'm going to expand my debug console a little bit here so you can see that if it works or not. I'm going to go ahead and hit run. And it tells me right now that the correct button is 2. That's the lighter one, so I can see that. So I click that. And what it does is it says checking button 2, which is what I asked it to do here. Then it says you got it right because I clicked the right one. And then it tells me that in this next game field here, this next game board, button 2 is also correct by chance. That's it should be random, so it randomly picked the same one. That's okay. So I'm going to click on that. It does the same thing. Tells me that I got it right. Now what happens if I click on the wrong one? So right now I can see these three are the same color, and this one is a lighter color. But what happens if I accidentally clicked on this one? Then, okay, it still reset it, but now it's telling me that I clicked on the wrong one. Now, right now we just have that as a console log. That's going to be important because later when we start adding in the score, that's how we're going to keep track of the score. Is when we get it wrong, we're going to have it increasing the score or decreasing the score. So that's all we have for activating buttons. The next part we're going to get into, what we're going to do in part 3, and that's in how to switch player turns. So we're at 35 minutes. Hopefully we can do the next little bit there in under 35 minutes, so we can keep this just to 3 parts. So that's all for part 2. I'll see you again for part 3 later on.